After a rough start to 2025 for House Speaker Mike Johnson, things have not gotten better for him. As we tumble headfirst into the second Trump administration, Johnson is already catching flack from members of his own party. First, Johnson denied a Democratic Congresswoman's request to pass a bipartisan resolution that would allow pregnant Congresswomen to cast congressional votes by proxy while they're away on maternity leave. Johnson's denial has actually ruffled feathers on both sides of the aisle. There's the obvious criticism that this is very anti-family from the party of so-called family values, but Johnson says that his decision has nothing to do with that. He says this is a constitutional issue, and since he is, after all, a constitutionalist, he has a problem with proxy voting. Or does he? Well, first, here's what Johnson had to say for himself. He said on NBC News, "I've filed a brief with the United States Supreme Court asserting that proxy vote is unconstitutional. That's been my belief as a constitutional law litigator, and I don't see any way around that. And it's unfortunate. I have great sympathy, empathy for all of our young women legislators who are of birthing age. It's a real quandary, but I'm afraid it doesn't fit with the language of the Constitution, and that's the inescapable truth that we have." An inescapable truth, he says. Well, Democratic Representative Jim McGovern says that Johnson himself has managed to escape that particular truth several times over. He posted a thread on X detailing Johnson's affinity for voting by proxy. Speaker Johnson is 100% correct, receipts below, and he himself voted by proxy. He thinks it's so unconstitutional that he did it not once or twice, but nearly 40 times. Before he gets into his promised receipts, McGovern says that during COVID, he led efforts to allow members of Congress to vote remotely due to public health concerns. McGovern confirms that Johnson did join a lawsuit claiming the move was unconstitutional, but the lawsuit was dismissed in the district and appeals court, and the Supreme Court didn't hear it. Then he claims that Johnson, along with several other House Republicans, removed their names from the lawsuit, essentially abandoning their effort, primarily because they themselves wanted to be able to vote by proxy. And then came the promised receipts. McGovern says that Johnson was okay using proxy voting to give himself an early start on August recess while still casting his vote against a common sense bill to ban assault weapons from our streets. He was okay using proxy voting to catch an early flight home while still casting his vote against a bill to reduce violence in our streets. And no, he wasn't ill. He spoke at a high school the next day. He was even okay using proxy voting to leave town early while still casting his vote against marriage equality. In fact, Speaker Johnson thought it was all right to use proxy voting for the entire last week of the 117th Congress, including to cast his vote against funding the government. He ends his thread by asking the speaker, "If you think voting by proxy is unconstitutional and you're such a constitutionalist, then why do you do it?" McGovern also clarifies that although his colleagues have engaged in proxy voting, he personally never has because he's never needed to. And in such a modern world, it does seem a little old-fashioned for our Congress to demand physical appearances to cast a vote, but I can see how something like that can be weaponized as a matter of political strategy. It has been in the past, with one party scheduling votes at inopportune times, knowing that many representatives would be unwilling or unable to show up and cast their votes. Now, Johnson is using proxy voting as an excuse to exclude Congresswomen from voting, denying them their right and ability to represent their constituents. Ultimately, this line of thinking could have a negative impact on women running and winning seats of Congress. Voters might be less inclined to support a woman if she plans on getting pregnant while in office, which isn't something that employers are even allowed to ask women during job interviews, because should she take maternity leave, which by the way she absolutely should, she would no longer be able to represent the people who elected her into office. It's workplace discrimination, and it's meant to discourage women from entering certain workplaces.
You remember in the late 60s we invented things like no-fault divorce laws. We invented the sexual revolution. We invented radical feminism. We invented legalized abortion in 1973, where the state, the government, sanctions the killing of the unborn. I mean, we know that we're living in a completely amoral society.
But nothing unites quite like oppression. Republican Representative Anna Paulina Luna has also expressed her discontent with Johnson's decision, saying on X, "This is not only anti-family, but is also a slap in the face to the hundreds of thousands of voters who send members to represent them in D.C. Female members should not be forced to choose between representing their constituents and having children. Until Congress embraces changes to reflect Americans' family values, we will not have true representation in Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, Johnson also ousted Representative Mike Turner, a Republican, from his position as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Well, not just from his position, but from the entire committee. He's just not on it anymore, and congressional Republicans are not happy about it. Turner has been outspoken in the past regarding members of his own party parroting Russian talking points and pushing Russian propaganda, specifically regarding Republican rhetoric surrounding Ukraine. And there's speculation that Johnson removed Turner from the committee at the behest of Donald Trump, which has led many, including the conservative Wall Street Journal, to lament the fact that Johnson, who was largely able to keep his speakership thanks to support from Donald Trump, is now so beholden to Trump that he's little more than a puppet. That is, he's more of a puppet now than he was before. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.